The unrelenting darkness continued to surround us as the night progressed, and as we continued to search for A. There seemed to be no let-up from what my eyes were now perceiving to be the smoke-black void, intimidatingly and intimately flirting with my now slowly depleting mental energy. A was nowhere to be seen in the immediate vicinity of the L-shaped buildings, and we grew increasingly frustrated at his sudden disappearance. B insists that A was stood right behind me while he was talking me out of my stunned state following my pigeon strike. It was literally 3 to 5 seconds. There's no way that he would have hidden well or gotten down the ladder in time. I dithered for a moment as I took in the situation, before deciding that it was probably best we head back to our exit point, as that is likely where we'd meet A again. I took a couple of seconds to look around me and make out my environment from the tiniest bit of light my eyes could work with, before getting out my torch and quickly shining it in the direction of where I believed our exit point would be. My perceived location was a bit off, however, as I caught a glimpse of a reflection way to the right of where I originally thought. I hesitated a split second about turning my torch back off. As I touched upon earlier, we always had a golden rule that whenever we were not inside of an actual building, we would turn off our torches to avoid giving away our position to any muggles. However, on the other side of my mind, I thought about how we have lost one of our friends and we are in a position of complete fear and survival mode due to the unknown of the black encircling us. Surely, I shouldn't care about getting caught. In fact, maybe that may be a good thing. We could maybe get help to find A with more people around looking. No, silly idea. While we have lost A, we have so far not encountered any real danger, so it would completely conflict our objectives if we started making a fuss and calling for help. The torch will remain off, for now. We don't want to give our position away just yet. We then slowly started making our way over to the light, now reflecting from the wall, slowly doing a joint 360 scan of the area for any movement or sound as the slow weary crashing of the sea waves drew ever closer. As we came within 10 to 20 meters of the wall, we noticed a black, unmoving mass a couple of meters away from the reflective strip. We drew cautiously forward, getting ready to fight or flight as this black mass was definitely not here when we entered. I was certain that if we got close enough to the black mass, it would cause it to move or engage with us, but instead, it just remained stationary. B eventually got fed up, turned on his torch and shone the beam in the direction of the black mass. It was A. We found him. A was sat up against the wall, curled up, much like I was when I got pigeon-twatted, and looked as pale as a ghost. He turned to acknowledge that we found him, but his facial expression of tired and glum did not change. Without prompt, he explained to us that he started feeling unwell when he entered the L-shaped building, but decided to stick it out and hoped it would pass. To me, that explained why he didn't look so fresh when he climbed up the metal ladder. He carried on to explain how the sudden shock of the pigeon attack made his stomach churn, and that he needed to quickly bolt from the building to get some fresh air, as he was convinced that the mold in the air was starting to mess with him.
I came to the conclusion that I'd take a breather, so I decided I'd rest here, as I'd know here is where you'd likely find me. I'm sorry if I got you guys all worked up. I should have said, but I literally needed to leave that area. The funny thing is, though, that it didn't start wearing off until I was more than clear of the buildings, and now I feel perfectly fine. Although, actually, never mind. It's not important. Unless you guys want to take a few minutes, I'm ready to explore the main buildings now.
A's tone at the end drew my suspicions. He didn't look fine, but I was eager to move on from the situation and explore the other buildings before it got too late. After we all take a few seconds to gather our breaths and restore some kind of sanity through the darkness, we ventured across the half-mile of building foundations to the main array of buildings in the compound. I was probably nearing my limit of anxiousness following the events of the L-shaped buildings. It's not like anything dangerous had even happened, but the events that did happen had left a mark on me and had my adrenaline coursing through my body. I started having a nagging feeling in the back of my mind that something felt off. But nothing was off. We were all perfectly fine. I was beginning to question whether I should carry on with this exploration, as I was pretty shaken up. and any further sudden mishaps would likely send me into haywire. But I'm strong. I know that I'll recover, and I know I'll be alright to fight it through, so I soldiered on. In hindsight, though, I shouldn't have been so selfish and obsessed with my own thoughts and feelings. As we approached the main part of the compound, the two big buildings seemed to elude over us as we passed the broken gate, which separated the main part of the compound from the smaller L-shaped buildings on the other side. When we walked a bit further forward, we found ourselves in some kind of town square, surrounded by the buildings. Straight in front of us was the road to the main gate, with what we assumed were where the barrier and gate operators would work. Next to the entrance operator buildings, northeast to where we were facing, was a small building that looked just like an average 3-bedroom house with the upstairs windows boarded up, but the downstairs door and windows gaping wide open. Alongside the east of where we were standing, one of the big buildings stretched across with its many windows and front door wide open, inviting us into our doom. West of us, 2 smaller buildings stood, both surprisingly well boarded up, preventing us from having smooth, easy access to their treasures. To the northwest stood the other big building, of which one of its sides was where we saw that the windows were smashed in. This building had numerous radars still fixed atop, all unmoving, probably like that for decades. I was surprised that they were still left intact after all the time the building looked like it had been left abandoned for. Before debating which building should be explored first, we decided to stop moving, ensure all forms of light source were turned off, and be quiet so we could listen for any movement. I felt a slight breeze gently caress my face as I could hear the distant smashing of water against the shoreline, which decreased my anxiety a little bit. Other than the distant crashing of waves, there was complete silence. Everything seemed very still around us, like we weren't the only ones holding our breath. It seemed like the universe had paused in that moment. After a couple of minutes, we started to decide which building to explore first. Consensus was eventually reached. We would start by exploring the gate operator's building. After the L-shaped buildings and before the big, intimidating buildings, I thought the operator's building was the perfect middle break point, as it looked like it only had 1 floor and was of a simple rectangular shape. As we slowly approached the operator's building, we realized, in this instance, that the darkness was on our side. Otherwise, we would have been visible to anyone walking around the estate or looking out their windows near the compound. Just as we were a little over halfway to reaching the building, we suddenly froze as we heard a car slowly drive down near the compound. We slowly watched as the darkness in front of us, near the edge of the trees along the walkway to the west, danced away to the light of the car, which slowly eradicated the colony of dark within the area. It was now or never. B and I darted behind the corner of the wall, whereas A, rather dramatically, dived in through what was the window, just before the rays of the headlights would have touched us. It was strange that the car seemed to stop just outside of the gates, with the headlights shining right into the base, as if someone was waiting to be let in. As I could see B's face, I could see that he was throwing me an inquisitive look. I responded with an equally questionable expression as we both listened intently. We heard a car door slam, and then footsteps as we saw the shadow of a person elongate as they got further away from their headlights, and even closer to the main gate. The main gate was directly in front of the operator building, just to the left, and as the operator building was not a big building, this meant that the car and its strange owner were not more than 15 meters away. Yet, this person's intentions were still not clear. Judging by the shadow which had now stopped moving, this person must have been near enough, pressed up against the gate, peering inside, looking for movement. It seemed like we were in this predator-prey stalemate for an era, before suddenly the person's shadow started moving again back towards what I hoped was their car. As we began to start to feel a sense of relief, we heard a stern voice.
"Tonight is not the night."
This caused B and I to exchange very confused and concerned looks towards each other. What did they mean by, "Tonight is not the night"? One car door slams, and the engine starts later. We watched as the car headlights swiveled away and off into the distance. B and I were still completely dumbfounded by what we had just heard before we remember that we need to check on A. When the darkness returned to greet us once again and we were sure that the coast was clear, we came out from around the corner and stood by the window where A had jumped in. Inside was pitch black and there seemed to be no sign of A. B started to lean in before committing to jump in when, suddenly, out of the darkness, a bright white face appeared, startling us both and making B nearly take off to the moon. A had turned on his torch to show his face and show that he was stood inside to the left of the window the whole time the stranger driver was at the gate. B started quietly ranting at A about jump scaring while urban exploring, while my attention was drawn to something that A's torch had illuminated while he moved into our view. While they argued, I flipped on my torch to investigate what I had seen, to find a flash of what looked like yellow tape. When I took a closer look, I saw that the tape had been wrapped around a section of the room which also included what looked like a closet which had its doors boarded up. When I realized what the tape had written on it, I felt like my heart turned to ice. It read, "Police line, do not cross."